With Nod Krai just around the corner, I think it's once again a good time to revisit the top 10 most fun characters in Genshin Impact. Now, once again, we're going to be looking at strictly on-fielders who will be getting the spotlight because a lot of the support characters in the game, the off-fielders, they're usually just having their gameplay being some variation of skill into burst, and that's pretty much it. You swap out and you go and figure out someone else, like another off-fielder. And whilst a lot of them are absolutely fantastic in making the characters who are really fun even stronger, or just outright enabling some particularly exciting ways to play them, they themselves are not exactly like super exciting to play. So I will maybe reference a couple of off-fielders from time to time, but in the grand scheme of things, we're not going to really focus on them per se. Now, obviously, this is 100% pure subjective opinion. I don't expect everyone to have the same list as me. In fact, I would expect you all to have a different list to me for your top 10 most fun characters. But let me just explain a little bit. What I like in an on-fielder in particular is essentially a lot of action, a lot of strategizing, and of course, a lot of movement as well. Before we begin, I do just want to shout out some particularly great supports in the game who have made a lot of the fun characters significantly more interesting to play. First off is Farina. Obviously, she enables Marashose Hunter on pretty much everyone who is an on-fielder at the very least, so that's really, really interesting. And then on top of that, she has some fairly readily available Hydro app that doesn't even need normal attacks, which does make her a little bit better than someone like Xingqiu Yolan. Inefa for bringing a new reaction to the game. This is of course going to be the case as well. Actually, for those who know, this is going to be the case moving forward when Nod Krai drops. And of course, I also want to mention Chevreuse. You know what Chevreuse does. Ian-san, strongest attack buffer in the game, and also puts a big emphasis on characters who can actually move, as well as potentially giving you a reason to move with the characters that can't move but actually can move. And then, of course, there's Shillidan, specifically C2 Shillidan. Specifically C2 Shillidan for the Electro characters. Oh my god! C2 Shillidan for Electro characters is so good. Not even as like a DPS increase or anything like that, just as a way of making it so that you can play your Electro characters so much more and have so much more of a better time playing them. Yeah, C2 Shillidan is like the GOAT, in my opinion. Oh, and hey, if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe. When Nod Krai rolls around, obviously there's going to be a lot of videos and a lot of streams for all of that good stuff. So I'm feeling pretty committed as well to getting Lauma. If you know what's going on with Lauma. I think I'll be C6ing Tingnari one way or another. And of course, there's going to be a bunch of other things to talk about. So hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and ringing that bell is going to be a very, very good idea for you. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Speaking of Tingnari, number 10 is going to be Tingnari. I've been enjoying him a lot more as I get more of his constellations, and the reality is that both he and Sethos are the only archers who really feel like archers. Maybe Sara occasionally as well. But I also really enjoy the missile spam in Tingnari's skin, and I feel like he's actually really underrated amongst the community sentiment. What keeps him at number 10 instead of being significantly higher is probably because of the various cooldown memes that I run into with him, but barring that, his gameplay is actually quite a lot of fun. In my experience, his damage is actually pretty good, and he has also got a few team options that you can really mess around with, namely Spread, Hyper Carry, and of course Quick Bloom. Grenade into figuring out the rest of his team into mass arrow spamming has been pretty much the way to go with him, and I find that to be just a lot of fun. So I look forward to playing him a lot more, especially if some of the rumors about upcoming characters end up coming to pass. I've still been having a lot of fun with Navia. That shotgun is still one hell of a weapon to use. Now, part of her charm today is getting her to move around a lot so that she can work with Ian-san. This is something that a lot of people think is impossible, but I'm unironically doing this all the damn time. Now, with this and her being a Geo character, it's actually one of those rare times where I would actually suggest Fav Shillinan over Peak Shillinan so that your ER on someone like Navia isn't really an issue in these kinds of teams. During her last rerun, I did end up also getting her axe just by accident as well, so her damage has been improved somewhat, and I guess my Serpent Spine can now be used on someone else. These days though, it seems to me that her gameplay revolves around using her cannons to generate ammo while the rest of her team sets up, then her shotgun pops off and does a lot of damage. Then of course you can repeat. Some people would like to be able to have that cannon also be buffed by someone like Ian-san, so that's entirely up to you if you want to do that. I personally not super duper bothered by something like that. But either way, it's a really satisfying rotation, and that's why she's still one of my most fun characters in the game. I love Aloy. I'm one of approximately 547 people on the planet who still love Aloy in Genshin. There's a far larger fan base of Aloy in Horizon, of course, but even today, despite her various shortcomings, Aloy is still the 8th most fun character in the game. Now, why is that? Because one of her team archetypes that didn't really feel like it was in a particularly amazing spot has now been made so much better thanks to someone like Mavuika. Meltloy got upgraded spectacularly, so part of the excitement of playing Aloy in a team like this is trying to get Ice Rush with a slightly less effective bomblet grouper like Sucrose. It's a little bit harder, but it's definitely not impossible. And then on top of that, figuring out a rotation that also incorporates one gigantic Mavuika ult Melt as well just makes the team seemingly do enough damage for the most part that I can still complete Spiral Abysses at the very least. And if that wasn't enough, I am now looking forward to seeing Cryo and Dendro Imaginary Theaters together so that we can potentially play some Rhymegrass Aloy. Yeah, Rhymegrass Aloy is actually really cool in my opinion. Hopefully that'll come around again, and maybe we can explore Rhymegrass Aloy with other elements, like let's say Pyro for some kind of Rhymegrass forward melt Aloy team. Is that a thing? Either way though, with what we already know is coming in Nod Krai, the future of Aloy is looking pretty bright to me. The almighty Narukami Ogosho, God of Thunder, the Raiden Shogun, is today, in my opinion, the 7th most fun character in the game. And I think a big part of that is because there really hasn't been any Natlan characters that need that massive amounts of energy that A can provide to their teams. This is something I pointed out in the last Shogun rerun video, so I feel like that's why a character who was at one point in time the most fun character to play is now currently the 7th. We'll see what happens and whether or not this changes in Nod Krai. In the meantime though, I did end up finally grabbing her C2 by trying to get C6 Chevreuse, and I think getting Shillet C2 has definitely helped in making A lot more fun to play, specifically the Raiden Inquisition, the Sweatlord rotation that I made a video about for both her and Biko's birthdays. This is probably one of the most fun teams that I play at the present moment. The newest addition to the list, number 6, is going to be Skirk. Skirk is actually a lot more interesting than I had initially given her credit for. One thing that can keep things interesting is both making a choice on whether or not to use your normal attacks or whether or not to use your ult, and the idea of potentially setting up her ult to be ready for the next round of something like Spiral Abyss. By not having Escoffier, I unironically get to play way more team variations than some other Skirk players, because it turns out that running C2 Shilin or C6 Ian-san can result in at least more Skirk damage, especially Ian-san, because it's also doubly hilarious to me that Skirk, a character who famously doesn't want to be in teams with characters that aren't exclusively, Cryo and Hydro, can also very easily maintain Ian-san's Night Soul meter. In fact, dare I say, she's one of the best characters at maintaining Ian-san's Night Soul meter, which is kind of psychotic. At the end of the day, she's not as high on the list as she should be, mainly because of how restrictive her teams are, especially if you have Escoffier. Although in Imaginary Theatre, she's obviously a-okay to play with the most random team comps thanks to the nature of Imaginary Theatre, so it's not like she's completely hopeless outside of Mono Freeze, but no matter, she's still a very interesting character to play in my experience. My wife, my lover, my life. And once again with C2 Shillidan, she is so much better to play. Lisa remains in the list to this day at number 5, and with some of the other introductions in the game, part of the excitement of being Lisa main is being able to play her in an absolute plethora of teams. For example, Aggravate with Shillidan, Quick Bloom, Lunar Charge, Overload, hell, Mavuika Over Vape if that's something you want to do. Probably my favorite Lisa team is still going to be International, chock-a-block full of some of my absolutely most favorite characters with more to come. And with the investment that I've made to this team, C4 Miko, I am still clearing Abyss with it relatively easily. I'm definitely one of the very few people on the planet who still play Lisa as an on-fielder, which is also why I'm one of the very select few people who actually play Thundering Fury Lisa. So I think no matter what, Lisa is still a great character to play. Can't wait to see what kind of shenanigans I can get up to with the Nod Krai cast. The former father of the House of the Hearth is, I think, the fourth most fun character in the game. Now, if you were to be as reductive as possible, Arlecchino is the most click-spammy character probably of all time, and despite allegedly getting directly power crept during the Nightline cycle, I do actually prefer her in quite a few team archetypes. Namely Vape with Yelan or Burning, actually. I think one thing that makes her feel a fair bit better to play than other Pyro carries is the fact that her normal attacks have some tracking. Anyone who's played fighting games may appreciate that an attack that also includes the character rapidly moving towards the target does make sure that they actually hit them at melee range. It does make that character feel a lot better to play. This is something that other Pyro DPSs, and I guess a lot of other melee characters as well, don't really seem to have, or at least not to the degree that someone like Arlecchino has. And on top of that, she can take advantage of the attack tracking to work better with Ian-san a lot more than most people seem to think Father can. So generally speaking, my favorite Arlecchino team would still be Vape with someone like Yelan, and she does seem to do more than enough damage that I think I'll be playing with her a lot more when Nod Krai hits. Who knows? Maybe I'll be playing an Arlecchino Columbina team. Ooh, that sounds exciting. For number 3, we have the first of the two Natlan actual entries in the list with Varessa. Varessa has a lot of movement, and I really like the kind of attacks that she does, including the first ever special ult that costs a lot less energy and is basically part of her normal gameplay. Plunge carries can be pretty fun. Varessa includes that and a bunch of other attacks where she moves forward, backwards, up and down. So it's really cool that with Varessa you're clicking, you're skilling, and you're ulting as well, so you're kind of playing what we call in the industry Piano Uther. That's a Heroes of the Storm reference for those who are wondering, where it was possible to build an Uther where you're basically using as many keys as possible. With Varessa, you're basically using all the buttons necessary in order to actually play her. The Varessa mains melee claim that she's actually the most fun character to play, and I could definitely see where they would be coming from to think something like that. At the end of the day, I just think the other two characters that I'm going to be talking about are a little bit better. I like them a little more. I suppose that if I were a big fan of wrestling, I would probably lean a little bit more towards Varessa. I also feel like, though, at the end of the day, there's a few other reasons why I would prefer the other two on top of her. But look, while she does move around a lot during her uptime, she tends to have a little bit of uptime, like enough to do maybe 2-3 uses of her ult, so I guess it's a little bit more restricted, which does kind of mean you're not having as much fun as the other two characters, in my opinion. The Pyro Archon is the second most fun character in my opinion. First off, outside of combat, she's got the most movement abilities in the game. You're biking across Natlan, you're biking up mountains for a little bit, you're flying on your bike for a little bit, and of course you're going across small stretches of water. Obviously, they're all a bit scuffed, but that's kind of for balance purposes, I suppose, so that the Archon doesn't automatically cause everyone else in Natlan to be basically redundant in this department. Although, unironically enough, Asha kind of ended up doing that, at least in the new area. Now, in combat, Mavuika is definitely the strongest character in the game right now. In my experience, she is doing unfathomable levels of damage in not even her best team, apparently. But I really like the Mavuika Vape team because part of my excitement is figuring out and perfecting a rotation that gives both Mavuika and Farina as many damage buffs as possible, specifically C2 Shillidan buffs. So with C2 Shillidan, we're actually giving both of these DPS characters, and we're also giving Ian-san in this case, actually relevant buffs for their kit, so that's really cool as well. Speaking of damage, normally I wouldn't put that much weight on how much damage a character does over how interesting their kit is, but the amount of damage that Mavuika does kind of brute force pulls that part of the scale up so high that she kind of does end up overtaking someone like Varessa and Arlecchino. I also really like the donutting and doing her bike's normal attacks. Look, she's got some pretty hilarious normal attack animations with her bike, and the 7-second Infinite Night Soul does also mean that if I want to play her with someone like Yelan, I can actually go even harder on the random ass attack combos, like adding in some boost with her bike and essentially moving around, dashing cancels and all that good stuff into a donut. Basically, anyone who's played C1 Hu Tao, or I guess even Skirk, may appreciate how nice it is to not have to use stamina to move around like that. Thus, Mavuika is the second most fun character in the game. There's a few other characters I just want to mention as being pretty fun to play, but they didn't really make it into the list. Sethos, who I also mentioned in the Tignari entry, kind of plays like Tignari. He does also have a really interesting and very unique energy mechanic that opens him up to some charge attack gameplay, or I guess some alt and normal attack based gameplay, so he kind of works a little bit like how Skirk works as well when it comes to figuring out how you want to play him. Next one is Garming. Obviously he plays a bit like Varessa. The only reason why I haven't added him on the list is I still find him to have some pretty mad energy problems, not as bad if you have his C4 of course, but they're still a bit cringe in my opinion. And then of course there's Kinich. Okay, here's the thing. I have played Kinich a few times, and he's not on the list because I am really bad with him. But I would definitely agree with Kinich mains if they believe that he's probably one of the top 5 most fun characters in the game, because his playstyle is like something completely different. It is actually pretty interesting if you're actually good at using him, which I am not. And then finally there's Neuvillette. I actually like how Neuvillette feels to play, but I feel like the reason why I haven't put him on the list is because we haven't really had that many opportunities to actually play him that much, especially as of late. Basically, we've had a lot of anti-Hydro Abysses. I mean, you can play him in the current Stygian Onslaught at the very least, but I don't know, I just haven't really found myself playing him that much. So there we go. The most fun character in the game, for 2 years in a row it seems, is going to be Clorinde. Why do I still place her this high up on the list? Well, here's the thing. She moves a lot like Varessa and Mavuika. Now, she doesn't move as much as Varessa because she doesn't go up and down, but she does dash around a lot during her uptime. But that also means it's very easy to run her with someone like a Yansan. And the other thing is that she's tanky as hell like Neuvillette, in that she heals with that dashing. There's some strategy that you could use to time your dashing to potentially focus on that healing instead of focusing on some dashing. You can make that sort of consideration on the fly. And on top of that, there's a very solid reason for someone to actually run Maidens on the team. In my personal opinion, running Maidens on Shilonen whilst running Scroll on a Yansan. Think about it, because that healing math actually works out that having any healing bonus on Clorinde in any way, shape, or form is actually kind of busted. And then, of course, you know it, she's got a gun, which is really cool. I also love that at the end of the day, relevant to all of the various meta discourse around her, Clorinde can actually run in pretty much every conceivable Electro archetype in the game. Aggravate Quick Bloom, Overload, Lunar Charge, Taser, Chaos, outright hyper teams with someone like Yunjin, for example. Hello, have you tried playing this in the overworld? And potentially if it's Spiral Abyss, it's a lot of fun. And maybe even superconduct teams if you're specifically fighting the freeze bot, or if there's something else like the context of Rhymegrass, for example. Clorinde still seems to do more than enough damage that I'm looking forward to seeing what new kinds of shenanigans she could get up to during Nod Krai. She's also one of, I think, 2 normal attack characters who don't even need to click spam, but instead they can hold click, which does make them a little bit easier to play and probably a little bit nicer to play as well. The other character I'm thinking of being Ayator. Both TF and Whimsy are perfectly valid build options. I still maintain that in most teams not involving Yansan, TF is still a little bit better and more fun to play. But at the end of the day, she's the most dynamic character to play in the game. So those are my top 10 most fun characters in the game. Who's been tickling your fancy? Let me know in the comments. What do you think about all of this as well? Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.